The airport hummed with restless energy, a chaotic orchestra of clattering suitcases, overlapping announcements, and the hurried shuffle of travelers darting in every direction. Amid the frenzy, Dr. Maya Jefferson moved with a quiet, unshakable grace. Her navy suit hugged her frame perfectly, the crisp lines accentuating her poise, while her dark curls bounced lightly with each step, framing a face that radiated strength and intellect. A modest gold pin on her lapel caught the morning sunlight, streaming through the terminal's towering windows, a subtle emblem of her extraordinary achievements. She wasn't here to flaunt her status, though. All she wanted was to board her flight, make it to the global summit, and deliver the keynote address she'd spent weeks preparing. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. At the first-class check-in counter, Jason Clark, the airline manager, stood like a gatekeeper, his graying hair neatly combed and his sharp suit exuding authority. His name tag gleamed under the fluorescent lights, but his thin lips pressed into a tight line the moment he looked up and saw Maya approaching. "Good morning," she said, her voice warm yet professional, as she slid her boarding pass and ID across the counter. She noticed the flicker of doubt in his eyes before he even opened his mouth. Jason's gaze darted to the ID, then back to her, his brow creasing as a faint smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. "This is for first class," he said, his tone clipped and edged with skepticism. "Are you sure you're in the right line?" Maya blinked, her calm unshaken despite the subtle jab. "Yes, I'm sure. Here's my ticket." She watched as Jason took her documents, his fingers lingering as he turned the ID over with exaggerated care, inspecting it as if it were a counterfeit bill. The seconds stretched painfully, and the soft murmur of the crowd around them grew louder as curious onlookers began to take notice. His scrutiny wasn't subtle, it was a performance. "This ID doesn't look like you," he announced, his voice rising just enough to carry over the bustle, drawing more eyes their way. "First-class tickets are non-transferable. If this isn't yours, you'll need to step aside." A hush settled over the nearby travelers, their stares prickling against Maya's skin. Her jaw tightened, but she refused to let him rattle her. "Mr. Clark," she said, her voice steady as granite, "I assure you that ID is mine. If there's an issue, I suggest you call your supervisor." Jason scoffed, shaking his head as if she'd just told a bad joke. "No need to escalate this. I've seen this before, people trying to pull one over on the system. Either show me valid ID or move to economy." His smirk deepened, a glint of triumph flashing in his eyes as he leaned back, crossing his arms. Maya's pulse quickened, a hot thread of indignation weaving through her chest. But she held it in check. "What exactly are you implying?" she asked, her tone still even but carrying a razor's edge. Jason's expression hardened, his voice dropping into a condescending drawl. "I'm not implying anything, ma'am. I'm just doing my job." Behind him, a young woman in line gasped softly, her hand fluttering to her mouth, while an older man nearby muttered something under his breath, his disapproval palpable but silent. No one stepped forward. Maya drew a slow, deliberate breath, her mind racing. She'd faced worse than this, boardrooms full of skeptics, dismissive executives who'd underestimated her time and again. But this wasn't just about her pride. This was about the weight of every glance she'd ever received, every assumption she'd had to dismantle. "I'd like to speak to your supervisor now," she said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. Jason didn't budge. Instead, he raised a hand and called out, "Security." Two guards approached swiftly, their boots thudding against the polished floor, their expressions a mix of curiosity and caution. "Is there a problem?" one of them asked, his tone neutral, but his eyes flicking between Maya and Jason. "This woman's ID doesn't match her ticket," Jason said, his voice brimming with unwarranted confidence. "I think she might be attempting fraud." The guard turned to Maya, his stern features softening just a fraction. "Ma'am, would you mind stepping aside with us to verify this?" Maya glanced at the growing crowd, some whispered. Others stared with pity or judgment and felt the sharp sting of humiliation. But she lifted her chin, her dignity intact. "Fine," she said. "Let's verify it." As the guards led her toward a small office tucked off the main terminal, Jason's smug grin followed her like a shadow cast by a flickering light. She didn't turn back, she didn't need to. His arrogance reverberated in the air, loud and unmistakable. Inside the cramped room, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow over the desk where her ID and boarding pass lay like exhibits in a courtroom. She sat across from the guards, her posture composed, though her fingers twitched slightly in her lap, a rare sign of the storm brewing within. One guard tapped at a computer, his brow furrowing as he cross-checked her information. After a tense pause, he looked up. Everything checks out. Her ID's valid, and the ticket matches. Relief flickered through Maya, but it was fleeting. Jason appeared in the doorway, his arms crossed, his expression defiant. "Look, I don't know how she got that ticket, but I stand by my call," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "First-class tickets are for paying customers, not." Maya's eyes narrowed, cutting him off mid-sentence. "Not what, Mr. Clark? People who look like me." The words hung heavy in the air, a quiet accusation that pinned Jason in place. The guards exchanged uneasy glances, the tension thickening like fog. Jason faltered for a heartbeat before recovering with a forced laugh. "Ma'am, I'm just following protocol." Maya leaned forward, her gaze locking onto his. "And I'm following mine. You'll regret this, Mr. Clark." Her calm unnerved him, though he masked it with another dismissive chuckle. "We'll see about that." She stood, smoothing her suit with deliberate care, and slipped her phone from her pocket. Without another word, she stepped out of the office, dialing a number as she walked. Her voice, though soft, carried an edge that hinted at the reckoning to come. "Elaine, it's Maya. We have a situation." Her heels clicked sharply against the tile as she strode back into the bustling terminal, her composure a shield against the fury simmering just beneath. Each step was a statement, a refusal to be diminished. The crowd had thinned slightly, but a few stragglers still lingered, their whispers trailing after her like a faint breeze. Ahead, the glass walls of the VIP lounge shimmered under the artificial lights, and there stood Jason, chatting with a handful of staff. His posture was relaxed, his smirk firmly in place as he gestured animatedly, no doubt recounting his victory over the troublemaker he'd put in her place. Maya paused in a quieter corner, her phone pressed to her ear. "Elaine, I need you here now. This isn't just about me, it's about the culture your team tolerates." Her voice was steady, but Elaine Porter, the airline's regional director, caught the steel woven through it. She didn't need to ask questions. She knew Maya's character too well. "I'll be there in 5 minutes," Elaine replied. Maya ended the call and took a deep breath. Her patience stretched thin. She'd learned long ago that true power often lay in restraint, in letting others reveal their flaws before the hammer fell. And Jason, she knew, had just painted a target on his own back. As she approached the lounge, Jason looked up, his smirk widening into something almost theatrical. "You again?" he asked, his tone dripping with mockery. "I already told you the VIP lounge is for authorized passengers only." Maya tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that made his bravado flicker. "Mr. Clark," she began, her voice a velvet blade, "I've proven my ticket and ID are valid. Are you now saying I don't qualify for the lounge?" He scoffed, waving a hand dismissively. "I'm saying take your complaints somewhere else. We have policies for a reason." She folded her arms, unruffled. "And what policy is that?" "The one where you decide who fits your narrow vision of first class." The staff nearby shifted uncomfortably. Sophia, a young employee with wide eyes and a nervous fidget, looked like she wanted to say something, her hands twisting at her sides. But Jason's presence loomed too large, silencing her. Before he could retort, a figure emerged from the hallway. Elaine Porter, her pantsuit pristine, her expression a storm cloud barely contained. The air shifted as she approached, her authority undeniable. Jason's smirk faltered, a crack forming in his carefully constructed facade. "Mr. Clark," Elaine said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass, "we need to talk." The weight of her words promised consequences, a lesson in justice that Jason hadn't anticipated. For Maya, it was more than vindication. It was a reminder that power, when abused, always came with a price. And as the scene unfolded, the onlookers, the staff, even Sophia with her quiet courage, bore witness to a truth that would ripple far beyond that chaotic morning. Arrogance could topple even the mightiest, and justice, though slow, was relentless. The air inside the terminal felt frigid, sharper than the hum of the overzealous air conditioning that buzzed relentlessly overhead. Jason stood there, his face paling to a ghostly white as the reality of the moment crashed over him like a tidal wave. His lips parted, trembling, desperate to form words, but nothing came, just the hollow sound of his own breath catching in his throat. Across from him, Dr. Elaine Jefferson turned to Maya with a softness in her eyes that radiated genuine care, cutting through the tension like a beacon. "Maya," she said, her voice steady yet warm, "I'm truly sorry for this mess. Please, let me make it right by personally walking you to the lounge." Maya's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile, the kind that carried the weight of experience and unshakable resolve. "Thank you, Elaine," she replied, her tone calm but firm. "But I'd prefer Mr. Clark here give me an explanation first." Jason's composure shattered under the piercing intensity of Elaine's gaze, a look so sharp it could have sliced through steel. He fumbled, his voice breaking as he stammered, was just following protocol. Her idiot looked off, and I was trying to make sure his words faltered, unraveling like a threadbare sweater under the pressure. "Questionable." Elaine's voice dropped to an icy edge, each syllable dripping with disdain. She stepped closer, her presence commanding the space. "Dr. Jefferson is not just any passenger, Jason. She's one of our most esteemed clients, CEO of Jefferson Global Enterprises, a cornerstone of this airline's corporate partnerships. And you thought it was acceptable to challenge her integrity, to drag her through a public shaming?" Jason's mouth flapped uselessly, opening and closing like a stranded fish gasping for air. "I didn't know," he began, but Elaine sliced through his excuse with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. "That's exactly the problem, isn't it? You didn't know because you didn't care to find out." Around them, the terminal buzzed with curious onlookers. Passengers craned their necks, their hushed whispers swelling into a murmur that rippled through the crowd. A few fumbled for their phones, eager to capture the unfolding drama. But Maya caught Elaine's eye with a subtle shake of her head, a quiet plea to keep this from spiraling into a spectacle. Elaine nodded, understanding the unspoken request, and turned back to Maya with a reassuring firmness. "Dr. Jefferson, I promise you, this behavior is an aberration. It's not who we are as a company. I'll deal with it right now." Maya inclined her head, her expression thoughtful yet resolute. "I appreciate that, Elaine. But this isn't just about me. It's about making sure no one else has to endure this, especially those who don't have the voice or the means to push back." Elaine's stern demeanor softened, a flicker of empathy warming her eyes. "It's handled," she said, her tone leaving no room for doubt. Then she pivoted to Jason, her voice snapping like a whip. "You're suspended, effective immediately. There'll be a full investigation. Hand over your ID and badge now." Jason's face flushed a deep, humiliated crimson, his hands shaking so violently he nearly dropped the badge as he wrestled it from his uniform. "Elaine, this is absurd," was just he protested. But she cut him off with a glare that could have frozen lava. "This isn't a discussion. Leave or I'll have security drag you out." Defeated, Jason slunk away, his shoulders hunched, the weight of his disgrace trailing behind him like a shadow. Elaine gestured for Maya to follow her, leading the way to the lounge with a brisk stride. Inside, the lounge staff buzzed with nervous energy, darting around like bees in a hive, adjusting cushions and polishing already spotless surfaces. To ensure everything met the unspoken standard Maya's presence demanded, she settled into a plush seat by the towering window, her gaze drifting to the runway where planes taxied and roared into the sky. After a moment, she turned to Elaine, her voice quiet but steady. "Thank you for acting so quickly, Elaine, but I've got one more call to make." Elaine tilted her head, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "To whom?" Maya's gaze sharpened, a glint of steel flashing beneath her calm exterior. "The airline's CEO. It's time we had a serious talk about whether this partnership is worth keeping." Elaine's breath caught for a split second, but she nodded, recognizing the unyielding determination in Maya's tone. She knew that when Maya Jefferson set her sights on something, the world bent to her will. As Elaine stepped aside, Maya pulled out her phone and dialed, her movements deliberate, her posture radiating quiet authority. Beyond the glass, the airport thrummed with lifeplanes slicing through the air. Travelers scurrying like ants, but inside the lounge, a heavy silence settled, amplifying the gravity of her call. On the other end, Richard Carlisle, the airline's CEO, answered, his voice smooth as polished wood, but laced with a nervous tremor. "Dr. Jefferson," he began, his politeness masking a thread of unease, "I just spoke with Elaine. I hear there's been an incident." Maya's lips twitched into a smile that never reached her eyes, a cold curve that hinted at the storm brewing within. An incident is a generous way to put it. "Mr. Carlisle, your manager decided it was his place to publicly humiliate me, to question who I am, to assume I didn't belong in first class despite every shred of evidence proving otherwise." Richard jumped in, his words tumbling over each other in haste. "I assure you, this isn't who we are. We're committed to respect and inclusivity. Do you?" Maya's voice cut through his platitudes, measured but razor-sharp. "Because today tells a different story. Let me remind you, Jefferson Global Enterprises has poured years into this partnership. This isn't just about me, it's about the signal your staff sends to every single person who steps onto your planes." Richard faltered, the weight of her words pressing down on him like a physical force. After a beat, he said, "You're right. I take full responsibility. The manager will face consequences, and we'll overhaul our training immediately." "That's a start," Maya replied, her tone unyielding. "But words are cheap, Mr. Carlisle. I need action." Richard cleared his throat, sensing the stakes rising like floodwaters. "What can we do to fix this, Dr. Jefferson? Your partnership means everything to us." Maya's eyes swept the lounge, her mind racing far beyond her own experience. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was channeling the silent struggles of countless others who'd faced the same indignity without a platform to stand on. "Here's what I expect," she began, her voice steady as granite. "First, a public apology, not just to me, but to every passenger who's ever been disrespected on your flights. Second, a complete redesign of your training program. Implicit bias, cultural awareness, and top-tier customer service shouldn't be optional, they should be baked into every level of your staff, from the ground crew to the boardroom." Richard's silence pulsed through the line, a telltale sign she'd struck deep. "And third," she pressed on, leaning forward in her seat, "I want your airline to fund a scholarship for underprivileged students aiming for careers in aviation. Call it a real investment in a future that doesn't repeat today's mistakes." Richard exhaled, his voice tight with the strain of her demands. "That's a tall order." Maya didn't flinch. "It's the bare minimum. And if you can't deliver, Jefferson Global Enterprises walks away today. I'll also make sure every Fortune 500 CEO I know hears about this. The fallout won't be kind." The line crackled with tension, the faint hum of the lounge's air conditioning filling the void. As Richard wrestled with his options, tallying the cost to his airline's reputation and profits. "You drive a hard bargain, Dr. Jefferson," he said at last, resignation seeping into his tone. "But I see your point. It's done." Maya's response was clipped, final. "I expect a public statement by day's end. And if I don't see real progress in 6 months, our next talk won't be so civil." "Understood, understood," Richard replied, a note of gratitude threading through his defeat. "Thank you for giving us a chance to make this right." Maya ended the call without fanfare, her fingers tightening around the phone as she slid it into her bag. The battle wasn't over, but she'd planted the first seed of change, a seed that would grow, fueled by the lesson that justice demands accountability, and unchecked power breeds ruin. Around her, the lounge staff had fallen into a hushed stillness. A young woman named Sophia lingered nearby, her wide eyes brimming with admiration. A middle-aged man in a pristine uniform stepped forward, his voice trembling with sincerity. "Dr. Jefferson, I just wanted to thank you. What you're doing, it's incredible. People like Mr. Clark have been getting away with this for too long." Maya offered him a small, gracious smile, her exhaustion tempered by purpose. "Thank you. But it's not about me. It's about building something better, a system where respect isn't a privilege, but a right." The man nodded, tears glimmering in his eyes, and a soft ripple of applause broke out among the staff and scattered passengers who'd overheard. It grew, a swelling tide of recognition, then that washed over Maya, warming her not with pride, but with the quiet certainty that her stand was already rippling outward. Later, as she boarded her flight, the air felt different, lighter, charged with a shift she'd set in motion. The crew greeted her with a deference that bordered on reverence, their smiles tight with the knowledge that her actions had shaken their world. Outside, the runway stretched into the dusk, planes slicing through the fading light. But inside, Maya carried the weight of a deeper truth. Power abused invites its own reckoning, and justice, once stirred, cannot be silenced. As the airplane climbed higher into the boundless sky, the hum of the engines blended with the voices of the passengers surrounding Maya Jefferson. Their tones carried a genuine warmth, laced with a deep respect that felt earned rather than forced. Whispers rippled through the cabinot, the sharp-edged murmurs of judgment she'd grown accustomed to weathering, but soft waves of admiration that seemed to lift her spirit as the plane ascended. Maya pressed her forehead gently against the cool windowpane, her eyes tracing the sprawling city below as it dwindled into a shimmering ocean of lights. Each glowing dot represented a life, a story, a struggling. She felt the weight of knowing this moment was merely the opening chapter of a far grander journey. It wasn't just her own path unfolding. It was a road she was carving for every soul who'd ever been told they didn't belong, every dreamer who deserved more than the world had offered them. Change was a brutal, uphill climb, but Maya had never flinched from a fight. This time, though, her resolve burned brighter. She wasn't battling for herself alone, but for the countless others whose voices had been silenced too long. The next morning greeted her with a symphony of chaos. Sunlight streamed through the curtains as Maya stirred awake, her phone buzzing incessantly on the nightstand like a swarm of restless bees. She reached for it, bleary-eyed, and watched as a flood of notifications spilled across the screen. Emails from colleagues buzzing with urgency, texts from friends laced with pride, and voicemails from strangers whose voices trembled with gratitude or curiosity. The media had latched onto her story, and calls from outlets piled up like a storm gathering momentum. Her quiet stand at the airport had erupted into something uncontainable, its echoes reverberating far beyond the sterile terminal walls. Amid the deluge, one message stood out, an email from Elaine Porter, the airline's regional director. Maya's finger hesitated above the screen, her breath steadying as she tapped it open. Attached was a link to SkyConnect Airline's official statement. Jason Clark's name leaped from the text, his apology stiff and formal, admitting to the discriminatory treatment she'd endured. The words outlined immediate reforms, mandatory training on implicit bias, cultural sensitivity programs, a promise to do better. Her eyes lingered on the final paragraph, where the company vowed to partner with Dr. Maya Jefferson to enact lasting change, a commitment to respect and equality for all passengers. Her lips tightened into a thin, skeptical line. It was a start, sure, but as she'd told Richard Carlisle over coffee days earlier, words were cheap without action to back them up. She set the phone down, the gears in her mind already turning as she began plotting her next step, the sunlight painting golden streaks across her hardwood floor. Later that day, the sleek skyscraper of Jefferson Global Enterprises towered over the city, its glass facade catching the morning light like a beacon of ambition. Inside the executive boardroom, the atmosphere crackled with purpose. The long mahogany table gleamed beneath the soft glow of recessed lights, its polished surface reflecting the faces of the leadership team seated around it. Panoramic windows framed a breathtaking view of the urban sprawl below, a testament to the empire Maya had built brick by brick. At the head of the table, Dr. Maya Jefferson sat with a presence that commanded attention, yet invited trust. Her posture straight but her eyes warm. The executives around her leaned in, their expressions a mix of curiosity and readiness. They knew her well enough to sense that today wasn't just another meeting, it was a turning point. By the door, her assistant Marissa stood poised with a notepad, her sharp gaze flicking between Maya and the team, ready to capture every directive. The tension in the room wasn't rooted in dread, but in eager anticipation. When Maya took a stand, she never did it halfway. Her voice cut through the silence, calm yet unshakable. As you all know, an incident unfolded this week that didn't just expose my own challenges, it laid bare the weight of responsibility we carry as leaders. The The details have hit the headlines, but this isn't about me alone. It's about the countless others who face discrimination every single day. Often without the resources or the voice to push back, she paused, her gaze sweeping the room. Locking eyes with each person as if to draw them into her conviction, the team nodded. Some with furrowed brows, others with quiet resolve. Their silence a canvas for her words to paint upon. Jefferson Global Enterprises has always been more than a company, she continued, her tone rising with purpose. We've built our legacy on integrity, innovation, and inclusion not as buzzwords to plaster on a wall, but as the bedrock of every decision we make. And now, it's time to ask ourselves, what are we going to do about it? She turned to Marissa, who stepped forward with a folder thick with proposals. Maya opened it with deliberate care, laying the first page flat on the table for all to see. We're reallocating a substantial chunk of our corporate social responsibility budget to launch the Wings of Equity initiative. In partnership with SkyConnect Airlines, this program will offer scholarships and mentorships to underprivileged students, chasing careers in aviation pilots, engineers, flight attendants, anyone with a dream to soar but no ladder to climb. This isn't just about handing out checks, it's about rewriting who gets to sit in the cockpit, who gets to steer the future of this industry. Her voice softened, letting the gravity of the idea settle over the room like a quiet tide. It's about representation. It's about tearing down the walls that have kept so many out for so long. We'll oversee every detail, transparency, effectiveness, real impact. That's non-negotiable. Michael Ross, a board member with graying temples and a sharp mind, leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table. This is bold, Dr. Jefferson. Ambitious. Do we have a number in mind for the financial commitment? Maya met his gaze with a nod. We do. JGE will match every dollar SkyConnect puts in dollar for dollar. This isn't a short-term PR stunt. It's a promise we're embedding into our DNA. We'll pull whatever resources we need to make it work. Across the table, Cynthia Morales, a younger executive with a knack for public relations, raised a tentative hand. What about the optics, the public-facing side of this? There'll be critics, people who'll say we're overreaching, meddling where we don't belong. Maya's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. Let them talk. Criticism comes with the territory when you're doing something worth doing. Our stance is clear. JGE stands for equality, and we're not here to tiptoe around it. This isn't about slapping our logo on a cause, it's about what's right. If anyone's got a problem with that, they can take their business to someone who's fine with the status quo. Her tone shifted, growing quieter, more introspective. But this initiative, it's just the starting line. What happened at the airport wasn't a fluke, it's a symptom of rot that runs deep, across industries, across systems. Our job as leaders isn't just to patch up the cracks, it's to rip them open and build something better. She gestured toward the screen at the far end of the room, where a presentation flared to life, expanding equity beyond aviation. I want JGE to blaze a trail, programs that lift up diversity and inclusion in every field we touch. Technology, healthcare, finance. This isn't about checking boxes or meeting quotas, it's about making damn sure every voice gets a seat at the table. The room hummed with murmurs of agreement, a spark igniting in the eyes of her team. She could see their minds racing, ideas taking root. She had the man, she knew it. But beneath the victory, this fight was personal, a fire that burned in her chest long after the meeting ended. As the board members shuffled out, their voices buzzing with next steps, Maya stayed behind, her hands clasped in her lap. She stared out the window, the city's skyline stretching before her like a patchwork of dreams and grit. Marissa lingered near the door, her intuition sharp as ever. Something on your mind? She asked, her voice gentle but probing. Maya let out a soft sigh, her shoulders easing. I keep thinking about the kids who'll get a shot because of this. Kids like TNA. Remember her email? The young woman who got turned down for that flight attendant job. No explanation. Just a door slammed in her face. What if no one ever stood up for them? What if they never even got a chance to try? Marissa's lips curved into a warm smile. They've got you now. That's more than most ever get. Maya mirrored the smile, though her eyes held a distant, thoughtful glint. It's bigger than me, Marissa. It's about leaving something real behind, a legacy that outlasts us. Marissa nodded, slipping out quietly, leaving Maya alone with the weight of her thoughts. The skyline blurred as a wave of emotion stung her eyes. She'd fought battles before, but this one hit different. It wasn't just her wear, it was a revolution for everyone who'd come after her, and she was ready to lead it with everything she had. Meanwhile, across town, Jason Clark sat hunched in his dimly lit apartment, the faint glow of his tablet casting jagged shadows on the peeling walls. The news feed scrolled endlessly before him, each headline a fresh lash against his pride. Airline manager suspended after discrimination. Allegations against black CEO. Fortune 500 leader exposes systemic bias in public clash. Jefferson Global Enterprises demands reform after SkyConnect incident. His name didn't appear in every article, but it didn't need to within the industry. Jason Clark was now the face of failure, a cautionary tale etched in pixels and ink. A candid photo snapped by a passenger during the confrontation had gone viral. His smug grin frozen in time, now a mocking mirror of his unraveling life. He scrolled through the comments beneath it, each one a dagger he couldn't stop twisting. This guy thought he was untouchably good riddance. Finally, someone paid for their arrogance. His chest tightened, shame and defiance warring within him. He'd wielded his authority like a shield, never imagining it could shatter so spectacularly. Now, stripped of his title and drowning in the fallout, Jason glimpsed the bitter truth. Power misused didn't just crumble, it left a wreckage that stained everything it touched. Back in the boardroom, Maya's vision stretched far beyond the horizon. Justice wasn't a gift handed down, it was a garden cultivated through relentless effort. And she'd plant every seed herself, if she had to. The lesson was clear: abuse power, and the consequences would ripple wider than anyone could predict. But wield it right, and you could rewrite the world. She was determined to do just that, own fight, one life, one legacy at a time. Jason Clark hurled the tablet onto the sagging couch, its screen still glowing with the damning headlines that had unraveled his life. His chest tightened, a suffocating knot of dread and disbelief twisting beneath his ribs as he sank into the cushions. The faint hum of the apartment around him felt oppressive, the silence broken only by the sudden, jarring buzz of his phone skittering across the coffee table. He glanced at the screen, his stomach lurching at the sight of his supervisor's name. For a fleeting moment, he considered letting it go to voicemail, but his trembling thumb betrayed him, pressing accept against his better judgment. Jason, came the voice, sharp and clipped, stripped bare of the friendly warmth it once carried during late-night debriefs or casual chats over stale breakroom coffee. The disciplinary panel has concluded its review of the incident. Effective immediately, your employment with SkyConnect Airlines is terminated. The words slammed into him like a fist to the gut, stealing his breath. He opened his mouth, grasping for something anything to say. "Can I at least explain?" he managed, his voice hoarse, fragile with desperation. But the supervisor cut him off, cold and final. "There's nothing to explain. Your actions have inflicted irreparable harm on the company's reputation. Your final paycheck and severance details will be mailed. Goodbye." The line went dead, leaving Jason staring at the blank screen, his hand shaking uncontrollably. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of absolute solitude settle over him like a shroud. His phone, once alive with notifications from colleagues' invitations to after-work beers, playful jabs about his latest shift, or quick pats on the back for a job well done, sat silent. No texts, no calls, not even a cursory "you okay?" from the people he'd once called friends. His family, though scattered and distant, had caught wind of the scandal too. Earlier that day, his younger sister, Emily, had left a voicemail, her voice probably laced with that familiar mix of concern and exasperation she reserved for him. He hadn't listened to it yet, the thought of facing her disappointment or worse. Her pity made his stomach churn. His parents, retired and tucked away in their quaint suburban home, had always beamed with pride over his managerial role at the airline. Now, he could already picture their furrowed brows, the awkward silences that would replace their usual boasts about our Jason at neighborhood barbecues. The dread of that inevitable conversation gnawed at him as he paced the cramped living room, his footsteps muffled by the worn carpet. In his mind, the scene at the airport replayed like a relentless film reel. At first, He'd clung to his justifications. He was following protocol, enforcing the rules, doing my damn job. But as days bled into weeks, those excuses began to crumble, exposing the ugly truth beneath. He couldn't shake the memory of Maya Jefferson standing before him, her voice steady and cutting through his bluster like a blade. "Not what, Mr. Clark, people who look like me." Her calm defiance had rattled him then, sparking a flare of anger he'd mistaken for righteous authority. Now, in the dim light of his apartment, he saw it for what it was: unshakable dignity, a strength he'd tried to crush under the weight of his own petty power. That realization burned, a slow, searing ache that spread through him as he sank onto the couch, head in his hands. Word of his downfall spread fast. His name popped up on industry forums, whispered in break rooms, and plastered across social media threads. A quick Google search pulled up article after article, each one dissecting the incident with surgical precision. His face staring back from grainy airport security footage. Desperate, he'd reached out to old colleagues for references, hoping to salvage something from the wreckage. Most replied with polite, vague excuses. "Sorry, Jason. It's a busy time," while others didn't bother responding at all, their silence louder than any rejection. His savings dwindled as the weeks stretched into months, each unpaid bill piling onto the growing burden he carried. He avoided grocery stores, coffee shops, anywhere he might catch a flicker of recognition in a stranger's eyes. The isolation clawed at him, a relentless beast that thrived in the stillness of his apartment. One evening, as the shadows lengthened across his kitchen, Jason sat at the table, a mug of coffee cooling untouched beside him. His gaze drifted to a blank sheet of paper, a pen resting in his unsteady grip. He'd decided to write to Maya Jefferson not out of some frantic bid for forgiveness, but because the guilt had grown too heavy to bear alone. The words came haltingly at first, each one scratched out with a trembling hand, a mix of shame and determination bleeding into the ink. "Dr. Jefferson," he began, "I owe you an apology, though I know mere words can't erase the harm I've caused. My actions that day were born of ignorance and arrogance, a failure to see the damage I inflicted not just on you, but on the very ideals of respect and fairness that should guide us all. These past months have forced me to look at myself, and I'm ashamed of what I see. The way I treated you wasn't just unprofessional, it was wrong, deeply and inexcusably so. Your strength, turning this into a movement for change, has shown me what real leadership looks like. If there's any way I can support the work you're doing, your scholarship program, anything, you'd be honored to try. I know trust isn't given, it's earned. I'm ready to prove I mean this." He signed it sincerely, Jason Clark, folded the letter, and set it aside, unsure if she'd ever open it or if he even deserved a reply. That act, small as it was, sparked something in him. The next day, he started volunteering at a local community center, coaching underprivileged teens on career skills. The kids were a whirlwind of energy and skepticism, eyeing him warily at first. But as he shared stories from his airline days, carefully sidestepping the scandal, they began to warm to him, their questions sharp and eager. It wasn't much, but it felt like a tentative step toward atonement, a way to use his battered experience for something good. The road ahead loomed uncertain, shadowed by doubt, but Jason resolved to walk it with a humility he'd never known before. The airport incident had shattered his life, stripping away the polished veneer of power he'd worn like armor. It had been a brutal, necessary reckoning that forced him to face the man he'd become. Whether he could rebuild was unclear, but for the first time, he wasn't chasing titles or authority. He was chasing something harder, something truer, a version of himself he could stand to look at in the mirror. Weeks later, the volunteer work offered a fragile lifeline. The center buzzed with life laughter echoing down the halls, the clatter of chairs as kids shuffled in for sessions. It didn't erase the mounting pressure of his reality, though. His severance pay was nearly gone, and every job application sank into a void of silence or curt refusals. Yet, in those hours spent mentoring, a quiet shift began to take root. The teen's story soft scraping by, of dreaming big despite the odds shumbled him. There was Marcus, a lanky 16-year-old with a quick grin and a knack for mechanics, who'd grown up fixing cars with his uncle after his dad walked out. And Aisha, sharp-tongued and fiercely ambitious, who wanted to be a pilot but had never set foot on a plane. Their resilience dwarfed his own struggles, nudging him toward a purpose that didn't hinge on clawing back his old life. One rainy evening, after a long day at the center, Jason trudged home, his jacket damp and clinging to his shoulders. He paused at his mailbox, fishing out a single white envelope. His name stared back at him in crisp, precise handwriting. His pulse quickened as he tore it open, revealing a letterhead from Jefferson Global Enterprises. Mr. Clark, it read, "Thank you for your letter and for reflecting on your actions. While the harm from our encounter can't be undone, I believe people can change when they face their flaws honestly. Your offer to contribute to the Wings of Equity initiative caught my attention. If you're serious about making amends, there's a place for you at leading, but working alongside us to build something meaningful. Our program mentors underprivileged students, guiding them into aviation careers. Your experience, paired with this new perspective, could help them soar. Redemption isn't promised, it's earned through effort. If you're willing, join us." It was signed, "Sincerely, Dr. Maya Jefferson." He read it again, then a third time, emotions tangling in his chest relief, gratitude. A flicker of fear. She hadn't forgiven him outright. She'd thrown him a lifeline with conditions. The next week, he stepped into the initiative's office, a bustling space alive with chatter and purpose. Teens darted between rooms, clutching binders and laughing over shared jokes. Maya was there, mid-conversation with a cluster of students, her presence commanding yet warm. When her eyes met his, she offered a small nod, neutral, measured, a silent signal that this was his chance, not his absolution. Introduced as a mentor, he dove into the role, sharing his knowledge of airline operations with kids who hung on his every word, their curiosity a balm to his frayed nerves. In that moment, Jason understood the deeper lesson etched into his fall. Justice wasn't just the swift punishment. Feccidite was the slow, grueling work of owning his mistakes. Power, wielded carelessly, left scars far beyond the moment of impact. Maya's movement, born from his failure, stood as a testament to that truth, a reminder that real strength lay in lifting others up, not tearing them down. As he guided his first student through a mock flight plan, Jason felt the stirrings of something new, not redemption, not yet, but the faint hope of a man beginning to rise from the ashes of his own making. Jason Clark had traded the gleaming boardrooms of his past for a modest office tucked away in a community center, where the hum of fluorescent lights and the chatter of eager students filled the air. His days were now spent guiding young dreamers through the tangled web of the aviation industry, a world he once ruled with a cold, calculating hand, listening to their stories of ambition clashing with circumstance, of grit forged in the fires of limitation stirred something deep within him. The work was humbling, a quiet labor that demanded patience and presence, yet it lit a fire in Jason's soul that his old life, with its polished desks and hollow victories, had never even sparked. Among the students, one stood out like a beacon, Marcus, a weary young man with eyes that burned with a hunger for logistics. Though his pockets were empty of the means to chase it, Jason saw himself in Marcus' the restless drive, the unyielding willbit where Jason's younger self had been sharpened by ambition into something. Jagged and ruthless, Marcus carried a softness, a generosity of spirit that seemed to glow even in the dimmest corners of the room. It was a kindness Jason had shed long ago, discarded like an ill-fitting coat as he clawed his way up the corporate ladder, leaving pieces of his humanity scattered in his wake. As weeks turned to months, an unlikely bond wove itself between them. Marcus would sit across from Jason, his notepad scribbled with questions about supply chains and flight schedules, his voice alive with curiosity. Those questions simple yet piercing forced Jason to turn inward, to sift through the wreckage of his own journey. He remembered the missteps, the times he'd let arrogance steer him into storms of his own making, the moments when he'd traded empathy for power without a second thought. Each conversation with Marcus became a mirror, reflecting a man Jason barely recognized but desperately wanted to reclaim. Helping Marcus carve out a path through the labyrinth of aviation didn't just give Jason a task, it gave him a purpose, a quiet anchor in a life that had once been adrift. He found himself staying late, poring over scholarship applications or tweaking cover letters, imagining the day Marcus might soar beyond the ceilings that had once confined him. Months later, the community center buzzed with anticipation as the first group of scholarship recipients gathered for a ceremony. Jason lingered at the back, his broad shoulders hunched slightly, his eyes tracing the sea of proud faces. On stage, Maya Jefferson stood like a pillar of strength, her voice weaving through the crowd with a grace that cut straight to the heart. She spoke of opportunity, of resilience, her words carrying the same unshakable conviction Jason remembered from that fateful day at the airport when her gaze had stripped him bare. He shifted uncomfortably, the memory of his public unraveling the scandal that had once plastered his name across headlines pricking at him like a thorn. When the event ended, Maya approached, her steps deliberate, her expression a careful balance of warmth and steel. "I've been hearing good things about your work with the students," she said, her tone steady, offering neither praise nor judgmentous fact. Jason dipped his head, the weight of her presence pressing against him. "Thank you for giving me this chance, Dr. Jefferson. It's opened my eyes." She studied him, her dark eyes searching his face as if peeling back layers he'd spent years building. Then, with a quiet intensity, she said, "Redemption isn't about wiping the slate clean, Jason. It's about what you build with the pieces you're left with. Keep walking this road." Her words hung in the air, heavy and alive, following him long after she'd turned away. For the first time in years, a flicker of hope ignited within him, not just for his career, which had once defined him, but for the man he might still become. Over the next year, Jason threw himself into the wings of Equity Initiative with a fervor that surprised even him. He wasn't there to bask in the spotlight or slap his name on plaques. Instead, he worked in the shadows, a steady hand lifting others up. He met with students in cramped classrooms, their voices a chorus of dreams and doubts. And he really listened, letting their stories reshape him. With Marcus, the connection deepened. The young man's relentless spirit, tempered by a quiet gratitude, became a daily reminder of the values Jason had once let slip through his fingers: integrity, compassion, the simple act of seeing others. When Marcus graduated from the program and secured an internship with a major airline, he insisted Jason come to the celebration. The venue was modest, a local restaurant with chipped tables and faded curtains, but it brimmed with life. Marcus's family filled the space, their laughter and tears painting the air with joy. His mother, a woman with hands worn from years of labor, gripped Jason's arm and whispered, "You gave him wings." His little sister, barely 10, tugged at Jason's sleeve, her gap-toothed grin wide as she babbled about wanting to be a pilot someday. Watching them, Jason felt a swell of pride, not the hollow kind he'd once chased, but something real, something rooted in the lives he'd touched. This, he realized, was his legacy, not the corner office or the headlines, but the ripples of change he could set in motion. Jason Clark's fall had been a brutal spectacle, a plummet from grace that left him broken and exposed. Once, he'd stood at the heart of a storm, a titan of industry undone by his own hubris, his name synonymous with greed and betrayal. But that collapse, as devastating as it was, had cracked him open, revealing a chance to rebuild. The man who'd once demanded the world's attention now stepped aside, content to let others shine while he worked to hoist them higher. He knew the past was a stain he couldn't erase. Every choice, every abuse of power etched into the fabric of who he'd been. But he'd found a way to weave it into something stronger, something good. Maya Jefferson hadn't offered him absolution. She'd handed him a lifeline, a shot at earning his place through sweat and service. And in that opportunity, Jason rediscovered what he'd lost: humility, a sense of purpose, and the quiet truth that real leadership isn't about standing above others, it's about kneeling to lift them up. So this tale isn't just about one man's stumble or a woman's unwavering stand for what's right. It's about the slow, messy miracle of transformation, the way a single act of justice can ripple outward, touching lives in ways no one can predict. It's about the hope that lingers even after failure, the promise that redemption isn't a gift bestowed, but a garden cultivated through effort and time. Marcus, with his boundless drive and gentle heart, became the living proof of that hope. He, a young man who'd risen not because of Jason, but with him, their paths intertwined in a dance of growth and grace. And Maya, with her steady wisdom and unrelenting standards, stood as a guardian of that truth, a reminder that power unchecked breeds ruin, while power shared can heal. Every step Jason took, every student he guided, every quiet victory he witnessed, was a testament to the idea that our actions, however small, can echo far beyond us, shaping a world we may never fully see.